Good afternoon, everyone. We have some people join us today. Let's wait some minutes. Welcome, everyone. So maybe we can wait just one more minute for the next people. We had a lot of registrations. We know that everyone's had a life and a lot of to do during the day. So let's wait just 1 minute, and then we can start with Sony presentation and then Annette's model. So the first phase of the first part of this event will be recorded just for internal reporting, but when the questions and answers starts and the breakout rooms, the recording will be stopped. Okay, so don't worry, you can take your camera off and then we can open it. So let me admit some people here. Okay, let's start. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first session of the Starts for Africa networking events. This is the first one, and my name is Patricia Vieira, and I will be your host for today's event. We are delighted to have you join us, and I think we have more people entering. And we are very excited to have you here and to foster your collaborations with these artists. Today we will talk about digital heritage, and we will have Femi Johnson and Annette Mudo to present their expertise and their experience on that. So in the first part of this event, they will present their work, and then we will have time for Q&A and space for breakout rooms. And if you want to talk with them parallel, you can do this at this time. So Femi is the first one that will present her work. Femi is a digital heritage specialist at Museum of West African Art, and I will give you the floor to present yourself and show your work. So good luck.
Yes, thank you very much, Patricia. Let me share my screen and then we begin. Just a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, cool. Yes, so hello everyone. I'm Femi Johnson, and this presentation was made by the MOA Digital Lab, where I work as Digital Heritage Specialist. And this is my view, our view, of how one could really merge the loftiness and promises of the digital age with the practicality of carrying out a project, especially one in heritage. And our workflow quickly for today would be a brief definition of terms, digital technology and heritage, and how exactly our lab use technology in a practical way to create and disseminate knowledge. And really quickly, this is our team who has been carrying out this research for the past few years. Yes, so what is heritage in the digital age? I've grown more to look at heritage as our shared history and culture, because all heritage of the world is part of world history and should be preserved and should be regarded. Heritage is more than just relics of the past. It is the essence of identity, the lifeblood of culture, and the thread that weaves generations together. It encompasses the stories, traditions, and knowledge that define who we are and where we're from. And in the digital age, our heritage transcends the physical. It becomes a living memory, accessible and immutable. I like to think of museums. Actually, that's what they were called. They were called the House of the Muses, the gods, where people go to be inspired. And that's a nice way to look at it. And that shows reason why we should take care of our heritage. And we can now start to categorize or start to present our cultural heritage in different ways so that we can because once we categorize, then we can archive them accordingly. And this is regarding data collection, not even the process to give it new life. For example, oral traditions could be easily digitized and archived by recording the sound. However, new life in this digital form could be maybe creating installations around it, or in all the numerous ways that we artists and technologists have come up with to visualize data. Next, another term that we've heard quite a lot and that relates to our whole topic is, what is digitization? And very simply, I like to see it as a conversion of language. It's a conversion of language from our understandable language to that a machine can read. Hence, it seems like a natural evolution of preservation in our world, as the academics of old rewrote things in new languages to preserve it for future generations to come. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the Rosetta Stone of the Matrix. But besides all of that, I think there's so many digital heritage trends. There's so much that we can find. There's a slew of digital heritage trends ranging from the very speculative to the super mundane. And essentially what all this technology gives us is a third eye view on these things. It helps us to analyze. For example, we have airborne remote sensing, geophysical surveys, we have story maps. Even making a CD of songs or putting things on flash drives is a way of digitizing. It could be a digital heritage trend. Even more speculative when we talk about blockchain and securing artifacts. That's a whole nother conversation. Artificial intelligence, whole nother conversation. However, we do have all these things and we do see them gradually intertwined with how we deal with our art, heritage, and culture. Now, going specifically into my work and our work at the MOA Digital Lab, what we chose to use with photogrammetry. First of all, photogrammetry is quite simple. It's very mobile and you can process and capture loads amount of data and be on the move. And basically, we started using photogrammetry because we can take pictures around an artifact and capture it and have a 3D model. And if you are using way more than just images, say CT scans or infrared lights, we're able to get more information and more detail from an artifact. And simple definition of photogrammetry: the art and the science and technology of obtaining information about physical objects and the environment by photographic and electromagnetic images. And to that end, one of the things that we started to do was teach people about digitizing and creating 3D models. However, now more practically and now into how we implemented technology into our 2-year research, we have the Plaque Corpus, which is a short story. In 1897, when the British came to Nigeria, they destroyed the ancient audience hall, where the Oba, the king, would welcome guests. And this audience hall was covered in something called plaques. You can see it on the screen. These plaques adorned the hall and they were made from bronze. They were very shiny, they looked royal. And when you come into the Oba's palace, you feel enamored. And they were scattered around the world. There is about 800 to 1,000 plaques scattered over 40 different countries. And the MOA Digital Lab has made it our duty to go to all these objects, scan them digitally, and bring them for the first time since the British invasion of 1897, so we can all see them clearly. And the goal is to eventually recast them in bronze and give them a place back in our current times. Furthermore, the audience hall which they were housed was destroyed and there weren't any photographs or written notes about them. And it's been our job to recreate this audience hall digitally and then physically and house all the bronzes that we have scanned. And so far, we've scanned so many. But what this scanning enabled us to do with technology, first of all, was to create this corpus again. Because as we all know, with repatriation and all the talks surrounding that, it's a long process. It's a big thing. And how can we make artifacts accessible very simply without thinking? Because when we think about the integration of art and science, a lot of times we can start to think about quantum computing. We're starting to think about NASA. However, it can be very super mundane. So what we chose to do was to, first of all, have this archive that we can spread to the custodians of the culture and heritage so that we can start to see, we can start to gain knowledge. So we started to categorize, trying to decode the hidden message. When we start to categorize things, we were able to see them at people, scale, water, the patterns. We can really zoom in. For example, we were able to observe breakage points, how they might have been pulled, and so on and so forth. It was, yes. And we were also able to synthesize relationships from naming. We were able to create a wealth of resource never before observed through an Afrocentric lens, which I think is very interesting that we're able to do with technology. Without technology, it would have been perhaps drawings, photographs, which aren't as, they don't have the same efficacy. Next was the audience hall. We were able to go to the ground and use another type of technology, recording audio of heritage custodians, synthesizing them on our laptops to try and visualize how this audience hall could have been, where these artifacts were housed. And to that end, we have these, this is the 2 years of research work where we're able to now recreate this digital space with all the plaques back on the wall, how we suspect they might have been. We were able to scan a lot of knowledge, translate quite a few things that weren't in our language through technology as well. And quite simply, that was our project. We were able to, like I've already touched on the research, we tried a multimodal approach where we went through archives, interviewed loads of people, and tried to synthesize a whole project from all the different modalities that you can see that we're firing from. And very quickly, we had a few project and editorial advisors who helped us out, a lot of cultural informants that we had to go through to dig and find information of this cultural heritage. And lastly, after we have gathered all this information, processed all this data, and tried to present it, there is a question, especially in Africa, about how can you now start to bring cultural heritage back into the people? Because in places that do not have that cannot afford to focus on beauty, when everybody's focusing on capital, everybody's focusing on trying to make money, how can you make cultural heritage work? And hence we have our public program. We had a few student workshops and trainings where we gave our research to artists to interpret them, have workshop with students, and see how we can start to reintroduce cultural heritage in a fun way to the students. We had them wear VR goggles so they can experience the hall and the artifact tangibly. We also created, like I mentioned before, loads of training programs for many Nigerian and West African youth, where we were able to show them the abilities, the things we can do with technology. Like I said, it can be very super mundane, because I remember when I was lecturing at Halfbecker Hamburg, we were talking about the integration of art and science. And when oil painting was created and brought to the masses, it was touted as new technology. So go figure about what we can put technology as or isn't. And to that end, I have come to the end of my, I hope not too convoluted presentation, and I'll be looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Femi. I don't know if someone would like to ask a brief question to Femi or not. We have a question here on the chat from Christiana. she is asking about the toolkit, where
Yes.
she can find it.
Oh, so I can put it back on the screen because I put a QR code for you to be able to download it, but you can check the Museum of West African Art website either way. I guess maybe that's something we can do in the breakout rooms.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So we can go ahead with Annette Mugo. She is a PhD student and here she will share with you her expertise and experience. So I will share her presentation, and I would like to know if you are already seeing my screen. Yeah, and if
Yes.
you want, you can go ahead and just tell me to go ahead with the slides.
Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you. I hope this works like this. So as you can see, digitization is not my main field of research, but I'm talking to you. I'm seeing it as a step towards healing the colonial past. So I've been, although I'm not directly related to digitization of collections, my work questions this action as a gesture of reparation for the colonial past. Drawing on my experience visiting and analyzing the work done in several European museums, I will start by briefly explaining what I believe to be the strategy adopted by most of these museums in addressing the colonial past. I will then move on to explain my research topic, which examines the colonial relationship between Portugal and Guinea-Bissau. And I'm sorry because I'm a little bit nervous because this is a little bit confusing like this.
Just
so you
relax.
can, okay. So my first example is the Royal Museum for Central Africa, the African Museum in Tervuren. The origin of African Museum dates back to the Brussels International Exhibition of 1897. And the African Museum reopened in December 2018 after 5 years of renovation. All these four museums I'm going to talk to you about work, as I could see, in 4 different areas when they try to work the colonial past. So they work in provenance research. In this case, in the case of this museum, through scholarships to Congolese researchers, and sometimes with the collaboration with diasporic communities, through digital, the digitization of collections, through contemporary art. They invite contemporary artists to collaborate with their collections and with their permanent and temporary exhibitions. And they actually do exhibits on contemporary Africa. So you can change the slide. The second museum is the Museum of World Cultures in the Netherlands. I spent 4 months during my PhD doing an internship with them, and the National Museum of World Cultures groups together or actually nowadays it only groups together 3 ethnographic museums, but it used to group 4 ethnographic museums. So the Tropen Museum in Amsterdam, the Volkunde Museum in Leiden, and the Wereld Museum in Rotterdam. And it also used to to have the African Museum in Bergendal. In November 2023, the African Museum in Bergendal left the group, and now they only have these 3 museums. They have collections that are 150 years old, and they all date from the 19th century. And they also work in provenance research, in digitalizing the collections, in participatory activities with diasporic communities that enter in the reshaping of the permanent and temporary exhibitions, and also, again, with dialogues with artists, doing exhibitions on contemporary art and ethnography. Also, I could visit the British Museum in London. The collections date from the 18th century. They work in provenance research, digitalizing the collections, again, exhibit. So this is a pattern that is always repeating once we start analyzing how these museums work this subject. And they enter with dialogue with source communities. And the last one is the Humboldt Forum in Berlin that opened to the public in July 21 as a place for arts and sciences, or, and I quote, exchange, diversity, and multiplicity of voices, a place where differences come together. So it's they join together the several ethnographic museums and with the university. The collections date from the 19th century, and they again work in provenance research, digitizing the collections, contemporary art, and dialogue with source communities. So now, are you, sorry. Yeah. So now, to dive a little bit more into my project, it discusses the debate around the returning of cultural heritage, focusing on the relationship between Portugal and Guinea-Bissau, one of its former colonies. Through an ethnomuseological approach, the research is investigating the relationship of Guinean people with their cultural heritage in the contemporary context, based on a fieldwork conducted for over 3 years, only by myself. It's something to say. The research presents a plural and multifaceted approach to this issue of restitution of cultural heritage, emphasizing that the solution is not simple and requires careful consideration of the needs and desires of local communities. The idea of reparation is seen as an ongoing process that should include not only the return of material goods, but also the strengthening of local capacities to preserve cultural heritage. So you can change. Okay, here you can see the difference between the conditions offered by the National Museum in Bissau, a post-independence institution opened in 1988 and closed 10 years after due to a civil war, and by the National Museum of Ethnology in Lisbon that was created during the colonial period in 1965. It's important to say that in Portugal, the digitizing of the collections is very, and also the studying of the colonial collections is in the very beginning, and also all these processes are very not visible yet. So you can change. During 3 stays of 3 weeks each in Bissau, In Bissau in January and May 2023, I proposed various actions based on the co-creation of knowledge. In January 24, I presented the results I collected to all my participants for a final discussion. I also shared these findings in the National Museum in Lisbon with diasporic groups. My goal was to understand the positioning of Guinean society towards restitution and to capture the meaning and value of these ethnographic objects to them. So digitization of collections is seen by the Guineans as a possibility. However, they prioritize the creation of infrastructural conditions to support and support for training technicians to enable the sustainable return of the collections currently in European museums. They also consider it important for some objects to remain in European countries as a form of representation of Guineans abroad, and so that the Guineans in the diaspora have access to their culture. They are considering the creation and dissemination of copies of the objects for this purpose. So, thank you. And I'm sorry I was nervous.
Oh, no worries, and just breathe. So thank you very much for your presentation, Femi and Anna. And now I will stop recording.